silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
One of the most important factors that contributed to the Axis defeat is the technological advances of the time. After World War I, both sides were understandably eager to end the war more quickly. Due to this, there was a scramble to create a superweapon that could bring a decisive early end to the war. As such, there was a great deal of military experimentation in this age. The American Manhattan Project was one such experiment. The Manhattan Project would lead to the creation of the first atomic bomb, which would be tested in New Mexico and dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, bringing an end to the war. The B-52, often colloquially referred to as the Flying Fortress, was also developed by the Americans at this time. The planes were not only well defended and armed, but also could carry out longer flights without refueling than any other contemporary aircraft. This factor was hugely important in the Pacific theater, where many of the islands that would be possible refueling stations were controlled by the Japanese. World War II was also the first to have widespread use of airborne infantry. The famous American Easy Company, for example, would be dropped into enemy territory and took part in the invasion of Normandy, the Battle of the Bulge, and many other hugely influential battles. The British code-breaking Project Ultra was another example of the Allies using technology to their advantage. Alan Turing created a basic computer dubbed the Enigma machine in order to break the German code. This allowed the British to spy on Germany and led to several important discoveries about Nazi plans. Similar machines were also created by the Americans to use against the Japanese. These code-breaking machines would give the Allies crucial information about enemy plans.
Certain economic truths have become accepted as self-evident. A second Bill of Rights, under which a new basis of security and prosperity can be established for all, regardless of station or race or creed.
When the United States entered fighting in World War II, it was emerging from its Great Depression. With a gradually strengthening economy and huge military spending, the United States was in a good economic place for a war. Germany, on the other hand, had just gone through one of the worst inflationary periods in world history. There were postage stamps that cost 5 million marks, a dramatic change from the rate of 4 marks per US dollar pre-inflation. Though the problem was largely solved by the time World War II began, Germany was still reeling from this cataclysmic event. The Allies also had a much larger economy. The combined GDP of Allied countries was nearly twice that of Axis ones.
The fact that my American forebears have for so many generations played their part in the life of the United States, and that here I am, an Englishman, welcomed in your midst, makes this experience one of the most moving and thrilling in my life, which is already long and has not been entirely uneventful.
World War II also occurred during a period of increased global commitment to the democratic system. all of the major Axis powers were totalitarian, with 2 fascist governments as well as Imperial Japan. However, these styles of government were quickly falling out of favor in much of the world. In the years following the war, nearly every country in Europe would become either democratic or communistic, thus fascism and royalism would fall by the wayside, with dictators deposed by uprisings and royalty relegated to largely symbolic positions. Franklin Delano Roosevelt's fireside chats also led to an increased commitment to democratic ideals by the common citizen. These informal, personal press releases were intended to endear the public to Roosevelt and to demystify the government process. Propaganda divisions also worked to increase positive public opinion about democracy. Largely through the use of appeals to emotion, the propaganda posters created by these divisions changed the public views on issues and convinced them to abandon pre-war luxuries.
My friends, I want to talk for a few minutes with the people of the United States about banking. To talk with the comparatively few who understand the mechanics of banking, but more particularly with the overwhelming majority of you who use banks for the making of deposits and the drawing of checks.
Another important factor in the Allied victories is in the name. The alliances and diplomatic relations that united many of the world's greatest powers. Though the term superpower is entirely relative, there seems to be general consensus that the United States, British Empire, and Soviet Union were the superpowers at the time. Having 3 universally accepted superpowers on one side certainly did favor the Allies. The contributions of more minor nations also should not be understated. Even countries that were not officially on one side or another often supported the Allied powers. Another important factor is the lack of this popular support for the Axis. When talking about who the Axis powers were, most people will refer to Nazi Germany, Imperial Japan, and Fascist Italy. A few might also name Norway, though it was only an Axis country due to its ongoing dispute with the Soviet Union. Though some countries like Sweden would supply the Axis powers with weapons, they would also act behind the other Axis powers' backs, with Sweden, for example, accepting numerous Jewish refugees from Europe.
The Bell Aircraft Company's new $1 million assembly plant at Niagara Falls is one of the first to use a conveyor system, inaugurated by the American automobile industry. 6 of these ingenious belts, which move along at the rate of an inch every 3 minutes, will be in operation soon. They will step up production of speedy Airacobras for the Army Air Corps.
By the Second World War, America had completed its second period of intense industrialization, and now had reached European levels of industry. America also had abundant natural resources due to its gargantuan size. Though Germany was often considered more technically advanced, it was also much smaller and had fewer resources. Because of this, the Allies had much greater military production in the years leading up to the Second World War. The Allies produced more than 3 times the number of tanks, aircraft, and armaments as the Axis did, and nearly 55 times the number of ships in the years leading up to World War II.